A puppy with broken paws crawls to a veterinary clinic. But what happens next is nothing short of unbelievable. A quiet vet thinks he's just saving a wounded stray. But this battered little survivor brings more than pain through the door. Within hours, strange men show up. Files disappear. The clinic is attacked. Suddenly, the vet's quiet life explodes into a dangerous mystery, one that reaches further than anyone could imagine. But why would someone go to such lengths? Over a puppy? What secret is this animal carrying that could get people hurt or worse? And when the truth finally comes out, will it be too late to save them both? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The night hung heavy over Mason Hollow, stars barely visible through clouds that threatened rain. On the outskirts of town, where pavement met gravel and civilization gave way to wilderness, a small shape moved with painful determination. The German Shepherd puppy's breath came in ragged gasps as he dragged himself forward, his front legs leaving faint trails in the dirt. Each movement was agony. The pup's once golden fur was matted with mud and worse, dark patches that spoke of cruelty no living creature should endure. Yet something drove him onward. Perhaps the same fierce spark that had helped him escape the horror of the fighting pit, where he'd been nothing more than bait for larger, stronger dogs. Through the gloom, a single light beckoned. It shone from the window of a modest building set back from the road. Dr. Ben Talcott's veterinary clinic. The structure wasn't much to look at, with its weathered siding and simple sign. But to the injured pup, it was a beacon of hope. Inside, Dr. Talcott sat at his desk, reviewing patient files long after his usual closing time. At 48 years old, his once dark hair had given way to distinguished silver at the temples, and deep lines marked the corners of his eyes. Those eyes, which had once sparked with purpose during his military service, now held a guarded weariness. A sound caught his attention, a faint scraping at the clinic's front door. Ben froze, pen hovering over his paperwork. In his 15 years of self-imposed exile in Mason Hollow, he'd learned to be cautious of unexpected visitors, especially after dark. The noise came again, weaker this time, followed by what could only be described as a whimper. Ben's medical instincts overcame his hesitation. He crossed the room in long strides and opened the door. There, collapsed on his doorstep, lay the German Shepherd puppy. The sight stopped Ben's breath in his throat. The pup's front legs were twisted at unnatural angles, bearing wounds that spoke of deliberate cruelty. Despite the obvious pain, the dog lifted his head slightly, amber eyes meeting Ben's with an intelligence that seemed to pierce straight through to his soul. "Dear God," Ben whispered, immediately kneeling beside the injured animal. Years of training took over as he assessed the damage. The pup didn't flinch or growl as Ben's gentle hands examined him, remarkable for an animal that had clearly known such abuse. "You're safe now," Ben murmured, carefully lifting the puppy. "I've got you." Inside the clinic, Ben worked with focused intensity. He cleaned the wounds, revealing burns and cuts that made his jaw clench with anger. X-rays showed multiple fractures in both front legs, some old, some new. The pup remained surprisingly calm throughout the examination, watching Ben with those knowing eyes. "You're quite a fighter," Ben said softly as he wrapped the first bandage. "Like a battle standard that refuses to fall. That's what I'll call you, Banner." The name seemed to fit the puppy's resilient spirit. As Ben worked through the night, memories he'd long suppressed began to surface. He remembered another time when he'd fought to save the innocent, only to have his career and reputation destroyed by the very system he'd sworn to serve. The scandal that had driven him from the military still burned, but looking at Banner's trusting gaze, Ben felt something shift inside him. This puppy's arrival felt like more than chance. As dawn approached and Banner finally rested comfortably under sedation, Ben stood at the window, watching the sky lighten. The pup's injuries told a story, one of organized dogfighting, of systematic abuse. The same kind of corruption and cruelty he'd once faced in the military existed here in Mason Hollow, hidden beneath its quiet surface. Banner's soft breathing filled the quiet room. Ben turned to look at his patient, noting how the puppy's chest rose and fell steadily now. Despite everything the animal had endured, there was a dignity in his bearing, even in sleep. "You found the right door, little soldier," Ben said quietly, "and maybe you found me for a reason." The morning light began to filter through the clinic windows, casting gentle shadows across Banner's sleeping form. Ben pulled up a chair beside the recovery kennel, his mind already working through the long road of healing ahead, not just for Banner's physical wounds, but for the invisible scars they both carried. For the first time in years, Dr. Ben Talcott felt the stirring of purpose, of responsibility beyond his daily routine. Banner's arrival had awakened something he'd thought long buried, a desire to fight against injustice, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. As he watched over his sleeping patient, Ben knew that both their lives had changed irrevocably the moment Banner had dragged himself to his door. The clinic's examination room hummed with tension as Ben carefully studied the x-rays illuminated on the light board. His weathered face grew grimmer with each image. Banner lay sedated on the metal table, his breathing steady but shallow under the influence of pain medication. "This wasn't an accident," Ben muttered, tracing the fracture lines with his finger. Both of Banner's front legs showed breaks that could only have come from deliberate force. The angles were too precise, too similar on each limb. Someone had methodically broken this puppy's legs. Ben's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted Banner's bandages. In his 25 years of veterinary practice, both military and civilian, he'd seen his share of animal abuse. But this was different. These injuries spoke of calculation, of purpose. Moving to his computer, Ben picked up the handheld scanner he'd used earlier to check for a microchip. The device had detected one, giving him hope of tracking down Banner's history. He typed the 15-digit code into the national database and waited. Error. No record found. Frowning, Ben tried again. The same message appeared. He sat back in his chair, troubled. Every registered microchip had a record. That was the whole point of the system. A chip without data meant someone had gone to considerable trouble to erase it. The wall clock ticked past 11 o'clock in the evening as Ben finished settling Banner into a recovery kennel. The puppy's eyes flickered open briefly, still glazed from medication, but managed to focus on Ben's face. Despite everything he'd been through, there wasn't a trace of fear in that steady gaze. "Rest easy, soldier," Ben said softly, making sure the water bowl was within easy reach. "You're safe here." He was gathering his things to head home when movement caught his eye through the front window. A black SUV with tinted windows had pulled up across the street. Its engine idled, exhaust visible in the cool night air. Ben killed the lights in the reception area and watched. The vehicle sat there for 10 long minutes before finally pulling away, its tires crunching slowly on the gravel. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Ben tossed and turned, his mind cycling through possibilities. The missing microchip data, the mysterious SUV. None of it felt random. The next morning dawned gray and damp. Ben arrived early, eager to check on Banner. He pulled into the clinic's small parking lot and immediately noticed something wrong. The chain-link fence along the property's edge had been cut, leaving a gap big enough for someone to slip through. His heart pounding, Ben rushed to check the clinic's doors and windows. They were secure, and inside, Banner was exactly where he'd left him, sleeping peacefully in his kennel. The puppy's tail thumped weakly against the blanket when he saw Ben. Relief flooded through him, but it was short-lived. As he turned to head back outside, he caught sight of his truck. Someone had carved a message into the driver's side door, the letters crude but clear. "Back off, vet." Ben ran his fingers over the deep scratches in the paint. The threat was obvious. Someone knew he had Banner and wanted him to abandon the case. They'd come right onto his property, bold as brass, to deliver their warning. Inside the clinic, Banner whined softly, picking up on Ben's distress. The vet returned to the kennel and knelt beside it, reaching through the bars to gentle scratch behind the puppy's ears. "What kind of trouble are you in, boy?" he murmured. "And what kind of trouble am I in for helping you?" Banner's only response was to press his head against Ben's hand, his trust absolute. Looking into those intelligent eyes, Ben felt his resolve harden. He'd walked away once before, when facing corruption in the military had cost him everything. He'd chosen exile over continuing to fight. Not this time. Ben stood and went to his phone, dialing the local police. As it rang, he watched Banner drift back to sleep, the puppy's bandaged legs a stark reminder of the cruelty he'd escaped. Whatever was going on, whoever was behind this, they'd chosen the wrong vet to intimidate. The overnight events had transformed what should have been a simple animal rescue into something far more sinister. Someone powerful enough to erase microchip records and bold enough to deliver midnight threats wanted Banner silenced. The question was why? What could a broken puppy possibly know that would make him so dangerous? As Ben waited for the police to arrive, he began documenting everything. The fence damage, the truck vandalism, the missing microchip data. His military training kicked in, treating it all as evidence. Banner wasn't just a patient anymore. He was the center of something bigger, something darker. And Ben was now part of it too, whether he liked it or not. The Mason Hollow Sheriff's Department lobby felt colder than Ben remembered. Deputy Mills barely glanced up from his computer as Ben approached the front desk. Photos of the vandalism spread across the counter. "Look, Dr. Talcott," Mills said, his voice carrying an edge of dismissal. "Property damage happens. Probably just kids looking for trouble." "Kids?" Ben's quiet voice held a note of disbelief. "Who erased a registered microchip? Who parks outside my clinic at midnight? This isn't random vandalism, Deputy." Mills leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You got proof of any of that? Security cameras? Witnesses?" He pushed the photos back across the counter without really looking at them. "File a report if you want, but don't expect much. We're stretched thin as it is." Something in the deputy's carefully blank expression made Ben's stomach twist. This wasn't just indifference, it was deliberate inaction. He gathered his photos, noting how Mills's eyes darted away from direct contact. The next 3 days proved his suspicions right. Each morning brought new damage to the clinic. First, the front window shattered, shards of glass scattered across the waiting room floor. Then his medical supplies vanished, targeted theft of specific medications and equipment. The message was clear. They were escalating. Each time he called the sheriff's department, the response grew more dismissive. "We'll look into it" became "nothing we can do," became "stop wasting our time." The last deputy who came out spent more time questioning why Ben was so interested in one injured dog than in documenting the break-in. Standing in his vandalized clinic on the fourth morning, Ben watched Banner sleeping peacefully despite the chaos. The puppy's legs were healing well, but the threats were getting worse. He needed help, real help, and there was only one person he could trust. Lenora Briggs lived in a small craftsman house on the edge of town, its neat garden and rocking chair porch masking the sharp mind of its owner. Ben's truck crunched up the gravel driveway at 9:30 in the morning, his heart pounding harder than he'd like to admit. He hadn't seen Lenora since that day 5 years ago, when everything fell apart. She'd been the only one who'd tried to reach out after his disgrace, the only one who'd insisted there was more to the story. He hadn't been ready to talk then. He hoped she'd still listen now. The door opened before he reached it. Lenora stood there, leaning on her cane more for show than necessity. Her gray hair cropped close to her head. Those keen eyes hadn't changed a bit. "Well," she said, her voice dry as autumn leaves, "took you long enough to come calling, Ben Talcott." "Hello, Lenora." He shifted uncomfortably on her porch. "I need your help." She studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come on in. Coffee's fresh." Her kitchen was exactly as he remembered. Organized chaos of case files and newspaper clippings mixed with homey touches like hand-stitched pot holders. She poured 2 mugs of coffee while he talked, laying out everything that had happened since Banner arrived. "Show me the photos," she said when he finished. Her eyes narrowed as she examined each one, particularly the image of the carved threat on his truck. This isn't amateur work. These are pressure tactics, escalating intimidation designed to force compliance. She looked up sharply. You said the sheriff's department is stonewalling? Ben nodded. Complete shutdown, almost like they're under orders. They probably are. Lenora's fingers drummed against her coffee mug. This pattern feels familiar. Back when I was working that corruption case in '89. Similar tactics. Someone with authority pulling strings. She fixed him with a penetrating stare. Like what happened to you in the military? Ben's hands tightened around his mug. I never told you about that. Didn't have to. I did my own digging after you disappeared. Found enough to know you were set up. She reached across the table, her weathered hand covering his. I'm sorry I couldn't help then, but I can help now. Relief washed through him, followed quickly by concern. It could be dangerous, Lenora. These people, whoever they are, they're serious. She snorted, pushing herself up from the table with surprising agility. I'm 64 years old, Ben. Danger and I are old friends. She walked to a filing cabinet in the corner, pulling out a notebook and pen. Besides, nothing gets my blood pumping like a good investigation, especially one where the local law is compromised. Where do we start? With Banner's injuries. Those weren't random, they were methodical. Someone wanted that dog immobilized but alive. The question is why? She began making notes in her precise handwriting. We need to trace his origins. Even if they erase the microchip data, there'll be other breadcrumbs. There always are. Ben felt a weight lift from his shoulders, not just from having help, but from being believed. Lenora's sharp mind and unwavering support were exactly what he needed. Thank you, he said quietly. She looked up from her notes, a fierce smile crossing her face. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. But whoever's behind this picked the wrong pair to mess with. Her eyes sparkled with determination. Now tell me everything again, but this time, don't leave out a single detail. Lenora's dining room table disappeared under stacks of missing pet reports and newspaper clippings. She jabbed her finger at a map marked with red dots, each representing a vanished animal. See the pattern? She asked, tracing a rough circle. All these disappearances cluster around the old logging roads, deep in Sawyer Woods. Ben leaned closer, studying the marks. That's Buck Healy's territory. Everyone knows to stay clear of those roads. With good reason. Lenora pulled out a thick folder. Healy's rap sheet reads like a horror novel. Assault, extortion, suspected arson, but nothing sticks. His connections run deep. She spread out photos of Banner's injuries alongside veterinary reports from other rescued dogs. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The precise breaks, the calculated trauma designed to immobilize without killing. Bait dogs, Ben said quietly, his jaw tight. They use smaller, weaker dogs to train their fighters. The injuries match perfectly. He touched one of Banner's x-rays. They broke his legs to keep him from escaping the pit. And now Healy's worried Banner might lead back to him. Lenora's eyes narrowed. These fighting rings bring in serious money. Gambling, drugs, illegal weapons. It's never just about the dogs. A sharp ring cut through the tension. Ben grabbed his phone, frowning at the unknown number. Dr. Talcott speaking. Fire! The voice belonged to Mrs. Chen from the convenience store across from his clinic. Your clinic? It's burning. Ben's heart stopped. Banner, he's inside. He was already running for the door, Lenora calling after him. The night sky glowed orange as he raced through town. Flames poured from the clinic's roof, thick black smoke billowing into the darkness. 2 fire trucks were just pulling up, sirens wailing. Banner! Ben sprinted toward the building. A firefighter tried to grab him. Sir, you can't go in there. Ben twisted free. My dog's inside. Without waiting for a response, he pulled his coat over his face and charged through the front door. Heat slammed into him like a wall. Smoke burned his eyes and throat as he crawled through the waiting room. Flames crackled overhead, debris raining down in burning chunks. "Banner!" His voice was lost in the roar of the fire. He knew the puppy was in the recovery kennel, just 30 feet down the hall. The distance felt like miles. A support beam crashed behind him, sparks exploding across his back. The pain barely registered. He reached the kennel door, the metal handle searing his palm as he yanked it open. Banner's frightened yelp cut through the chaos. The puppy huddled in the back of his cage, trembling but alive. Ben ripped open the door, scooping Banner into his arms. "I've got you, boy, I've got you." The return journey was a nightmare of smoke and flame. Ben's lungs screamed for air. His exposed skin felt like it was melting. He stumbled, nearly falling as another beam gave way. Suddenly, hands grabbed him, dragging both him and Banner into the cool night air. He collapsed onto the pavement, coughing violently. Paramedics swarmed around them. "Banner," he wheezed. "Check Banner first." "The dog's okay," someone assured him. "Just some smoke inhalation. You're the one who needs treatment." Ben became aware of the burning pain across his back and arms. His right hand was badly blistered where he'd grabbed the door handle. But Banner was safe, curled against his chest, shaking but unharmed. Lenora appeared through the chaos, her face tight with worry. "You crazy fool," she said, but her voice was gentle. "They're saying it was definitely arson. Accelerant patterns, disabled sprinkler system, professional job." "Healy," Ben growled, wincing as paramedics began treating his burns. "Had to be." Lenora watched the firefighters battle the blaze. "He's sending a message. This is what happens to people who dig too deep." Banner whimpered, pressing closer to Ben. Despite his injuries, Ben managed to stroke the puppy's head with his unbandaged hand. "It's okay, boy. We're not giving up." "The clinic's a total loss," Lenora said quietly. "You can't stay here. Both of you will come home with me tonight." Ben started to protest, but she cut him off. "No arguments. I've got a spare room and a good security system. Plus," she smiled grimly, "I sleep light and keep a shotgun by the bed." As they watched his clinic burn, Ben felt something shift inside him. The same quiet rage that had driven him to charge into the fire hardened into steel determination. He looked down at Banner, then at Lenora. "We need to stop them," he said. "Not just for Banner, for all of them." Lenora nodded, her expression matching his resolve. "We will. Healy just made a big mistake. He thought burning down your clinic would scare us off." She rested her hand on his shoulder, careful to avoid his burns. "Instead, he just gave us proof of how far he'll go to keep his operation hidden." Lenora's cabin sat nestled in a thick grove of pine trees, hidden from the main road by years of careful landscaping. Inside, Banner lay curled on a worn quilt, his bandaged legs stretched out as he dozed in patches of afternoon sunlight. The puppy's gentle breathing filled the small living room, where Ben sat in an old armchair, lost in thought. His fingers absently traced the fresh burn marks on his palm, while his mind drifted back to that day, 8 years ago, the day everything changed. He could still see General Morrison's face, red with fury, as he'd confronted Ben about the falsified inspection reports at the military's experimental medical facility. "Those animals were being tortured," Ben whispered to the quiet room. "Not tested, tortured." He'd refused to sign off on the experiments, threatened to expose everything. Instead, Morrison had turned the tables, painting Ben as a disgruntled employee tampering with official records. The scandal cost him his military career, his reputation, everything he'd built. Banner's ears twitched in his sleep, and Ben smiled despite the heavy memories. "Maybe this is why you found me, boy. Maybe we both need a second chance at justice." The front door creaked open as Lenora returned, her arms full of manila folders. She spread them across the kitchen table, organizing them with practiced efficiency. "Remember that whistleblower report from 2 years ago?" She held up a thick file. "The one about illegal animal trafficking that mysteriously vanished from the system? I called in some favors, found a backup copy buried in the archives." Ben moved to join her at the table. What's the connection? Look at this. She pointed to a list of names. The whistleblower identified 3 key players in an underground network. One of them was Buck Healy. But here's where it gets interesting. She flipped to another page. The report mentioned a high-ranking military contact who provided protection and resources. Ben's breath caught. Morrison. Can't prove it yet, but the pieces fit. Lenora laid out more documents. These are records of missing dogs from 5 different counties. Notice anything strange? Ben studied the papers. The investigation files. They're all marked as reviewed by different departments, but the signature codes are identical. Exactly. Someone's using multiple false credentials to bury these cases. Someone with serious clearance. Lenora tapped her fingers on the table. The same way your evidence against Morrison disappeared 8 years ago. Banner whimpered in his sleep, his legs twitching. Ben moved to comfort him, gently stroking the puppy's head until he settled. It's bigger than dogfighting, isn't it? Ben asked quietly. Lenora nodded. I think Morrison's been using Healy's operation as a cover for something else. The fighting rings bring in cash, sure, but they're also perfect for moving other things. Drugs, weapons, anything that needs to stay off the books. She pulled out a map marked with careful notes. See these locations? Every time there's a major dogfighting event, there's also unusual activity at the nearby military surplus warehouse. Convoy movements that don't match any official schedules. And Banner? Ben glanced at the sleeping puppy. How does he fit in? Look at his injuries again. Really look at them. Lenora spread out the medical photos. Those aren't just fighting wounds. Some of those marks match surgical patterns. I think he escaped from somewhere else before Healy got him. Somewhere that was doing more than training fighting dogs. Ben felt cold anger settling in his chest. They're still doing it. The same experiments I tried to stop 8 years ago. They just moved them underground. And now we have proof. Lenora gathered the files carefully. Banner is living evidence of what they're doing. That's why they're so desperate to silence us. Banner stirred, lifting his head to look at them with alert eyes. Despite his injuries, there was something unbreakable in his spirit. Ben saw the same strength he'd witnessed countless times in the clinic, a determination to survive, to fight back. We need to be careful, Lenora warned. These people have already shown they'll use violence, and with Morrison potentially involved, we can't trust official channels. Then we'll build our case quietly, Ben said, his voice firm. Document everything. Find witnesses. Create a trail too solid to disappear. It won't be easy, Lenora said, and it won't be safe. I know. Ben watched Banner struggling to stand, his bandaged legs shaking with effort. The puppy managed 3 wobbly steps before settling again, his tail wagging with quiet triumph. But I ran away once before. Let them bury the truth because fighting back seemed impossible. I won't make that mistake again. Lenora smiled, her eyes bright with determination. Well then, partner, let's get to work. We got a lot of digging to do. Lenora burst through the cabin door, her face flushed with excitement. Got it. She waved a small flash drive in the air. Security footage from the old Thompson estate on the outskirts of town. You won't believe what I found. Ben looked up from where he was changing Banner's bandages. The Thompson estate? That place has been empty for years. Not empty, just quiet. Lenora plugged the drive into her laptop. Watch this. The grainy footage showed a line of expensive cars rolling through iron gates at midnight. Men in suits emerged, walking purposefully toward a renovated barn. Among them, a familiar face caught Ben's attention. Wait, freeze that frame. Ben leaned closer. That's James Morrison, Jr., the senator's son. Running for state office himself now, Lenora nodded grimly. And look who's directing traffic. She advanced the video, revealing Buck Healy's hulking figure guiding vehicles into hidden parking spots. The estate's been converted into their private fighting arena, Lenora explained. These gatherings happen twice a month. The senator's son uses them to launder campaign money through illegal betting. Banner whimpered softly, pressing against Ben's leg. The doctor scratched behind the puppy's ears, his jaw tight. So that's why the local police won't touch it. Political protection. Exactly. Lenora closed her laptop. But I have a plan. They're desperate to find Banner because he's evidence. What if we convince them he's gone? Ben frowned. How? We fake his death. Lenora's eyes gleamed. Plant the story that he didn't survive the clinic fire. Once they think the evidence is destroyed, they'll let their guard down. That's when I go in. Absolutely not, Ben protested. It's too dangerous. These people are killers. I'm not asking permission. Lenora's voice was steel. I've already arranged a cover identity through my old contacts. Next fight is in 3 days. I'll be there as a potential investor. Ben paced the small room, Banner watching him with worried eyes. You'll need backup. That's where you come in. Lenora spread out a detailed map of the estate. There's a maintenance shed with a clear view of the barn. You'll monitor everything from there. If something goes wrong, you can alert the state police task force I've quietly contacted. The next morning, local news reported the tragic death of an injured German Shepherd in the clinic fire. Lenora's contacts in the media played their parts perfectly, even including a tearful interview with a witness. Banner stayed hidden in the cabin's basement, extra blankets muffling his occasional barks. 3 nights later, Lenora stepped out of a sleek black car at the Thompson estate gates. She wore an expensive pantsuit, her gray hair elegantly styled, looking every inch the wealthy fight enthusiast. A small camera was cleverly concealed in her designer glasses. Name? Buck Healy's gruff voice carried across the gravel drive. Margaret Whitmore. Lenora's tone dripped old money confidence. Senator Carlton sends his regards. The name drop worked. Healy's posture shifted slightly, becoming almost deferential. Welcome, Ms. Whitmore. Right this way. From his position in the maintenance shed, Ben watched through high-powered binoculars. He could see Lenora being led into the converted barn, where string lights cast an eerie glow through the windows. His earpiece crackled with her whispered commentary. At least 30 people here. Fighting pit in the center. James Morrison, Jr. holding court by the betting table. Her voice was barely audible over the crowd noise. Ben's hands clenched as he heard the sounds of dogs snarling, men shouting bets. He thought of Banner, safe at the cabin, and forced himself to stay focused. Lenora's camera captured everything. The senator's son handling thick stacks of cash, Buck Healy coordinating the fights, and most damning of all, a ledger showing clear connections between campaign funds and illegal gambling profits. Got what we need, Lenora murmured, starting my exit now. But as she turned to leave, a hand gripped her arm. Leaving so soon, Ms. Whitmore? Buck Healy's voice had turned menacing. Or should I say, Detective Briggs? Ben's heart stopped. Through his binoculars, he saw Healy pulling Lenora toward a side door. His finger moved to the alert button that would summon the state police, but Lenora's voice came through clearly. Not yet. Evidence first. With remarkable composure, Lenora laughed loudly. Detective? Oh my, there must be some mistake. I'm sure Senator Carlton would be quite amused. Her theatrical response drew attention. James Morrison, Jr. approached, clearly annoyed by the disturbance. What's going on here, Buck? The momentary distraction was all Lenora needed. She pressed a hidden button on her glasses, instantly transmitting all the recorded footage to Ben's secure laptop. Then she smoothly extracted herself from Healy's grip, maintaining her socialite persona. Just a misunderstanding, I'm sure, she said sweetly. Though I must say your security seems a bit overzealous. I'll be sure to mention it to the senator. Morrison Jr. shot Healy a warning look. My apologies, Ms. Whitmore. Please, allow me to escort you to your car. Ben watched, barely breathing, as Lenora walked calmly to her vehicle. Only when she had driven through the gates did he activate his radio. Package secured. Move in. The victory was sweet but short. Less than 24 hours after their undercover operation, Lenora's car spun out of control on Mason Road. 3 black SUVs had surrounded her, trying to force her off the steep embankment. Only her years of tactical driving training saved her life. She limped into the cabin an hour later, her face scratched from flying glass. "They knew exactly where to find me," she said, collapsing into a chair. "Healy must have run my plates after I left." Ben handed her an ice pack. "Are you hurt?" "Just bruised." Lenora winced as she pressed the ice to her shoulder. "But they're not playing anymore, Ben. They know who I am, and they know Banner's alive somewhere." Banner padded over to Lenora, resting his head on her knee. His front legs were healing well, though he still favored them when walking. The sight of his concerned amber eyes brought tears to Lenora's. "We have everything we need," Ben said quietly. "The footage, the financial records, Morrison's direct involvement. But Healy will do anything to stop us from using it." Lenora nodded grimly. "He's desperate now, and desperate men are the most dangerous." They spent the next hour planning, knowing they had only one chance to get this right. The burned-out shell of Ben's clinic would be their battleground. It was remote enough to avoid civilian casualties, but close enough for backup to reach them quickly. "I'll be the bait," Ben insisted. "Healy wants me dead anyway. He'll come himself. He's too angry now to send someone else." "It's risky," Lenora said, spreading out blueprints of the clinic. "But we can use the layout to our advantage. I've already contacted state police and FBI contacts I trust. They'll be positioned here and here." She pointed to locations on the map. Close enough to respond, far enough to stay hidden. They worked through the night, setting up their trap. Tiny cameras were hidden in the clinic's charred remains, covering every angle. Motion sensors were planted along the access road. Emergency signals were tested and retested. Banner watched them work, refusing to stay in the cabin's basement where Ben had tried to leave him. The puppy followed Ben everywhere, pressing close to his leg whenever they stopped moving. "He knows something's wrong," Lenora observed, watching Banner's protective behavior. "Dogs always know." As dawn approached, Ben sat at Lenora's kitchen table, writing by lamplight. The words came slowly, painfully, but he needed to put them down. "Dear Sarah," he wrote to his sister, "if you're reading this, things didn't go as planned. I need you to know why I disappeared 5 years ago. The scandal wasn't what everyone thought. Colonel Matthews was running an illegal medical supply ring, using our unit as cover. When I discovered it, he gave me a choice. Take the blame, or watch as he destroyed the careers of every young medic under my command. I chose silence and disgrace. But I can't choose silence anymore." He sealed the letter and handed it to Lenora. "Just in case," he said quietly. "It won't come to that," she replied firmly, but she tucked the envelope into her jacket pocket. They drove to the clinic separately, taking different routes. Lenora would coordinate from a hidden position in the tree line, while Ben waited in plain sight. Banner, despite their best efforts to secure him in the car, somehow managed to slip out and limp determinedly to Ben's side. "Stubborn dog," Ben muttered, but his hand shook slightly as he patted Banner's head. The morning sun cast long shadows through the clinic's broken windows. Ben stood in what had been his examination room, Banner pressed against his leg. The puppy's ears were alert, swiveling at every sound. "Everything's set," Lenora's voice came through his earpiece. "Cameras are live. Backup is in position. Remember, we just need to keep him talking long enough to get a confession on tape." Ben touched his chest, feeling the wire beneath his shirt. "And if he starts shooting instead of talking, then we do this the hard way." Lenora's voice was steel. "But we're ending this today one way or another." Banner suddenly growled, a low rumble that Ben had never heard from him before. In the distance, they could hear the sound of vehicles approaching. "He's coming," Lenora whispered in the earpiece. 3 vehicles. Healy's in the lead car. Get ready." Ben took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Banner stood firmly beside him, no longer the broken, crawling creature who had first dragged himself to Ben's door. Together, they faced the entrance, waiting for their moment of truth. "Whatever happens," Ben said softly to Banner, "you showed me what real courage looks like. Thank you for that, old friend." The vehicles were close now. Gravel crunched under heavy tires. Car doors slammed. "Here we go!" Lenore's voice was barely a whisper. "God be with us all." Buck Healy emerged from his black SUV like a nightmare made real. His massive frame blocked the morning sun as he stalked toward the clinic ruins, flanked by 4 burly men. His face was twisted in a cruel smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Should have stayed dead, Doc," Healy called out, his voice echoing through the burned-out building. "Now I gotta make it permanent." Ben stood his ground, Banner rigid beside him. "It's over, Buck. We have everything. The fights, the senator's son, all of it." Healy's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "You got nothing but a death wish." He gestured to his men. "Search the perimeter. Find the old lady. She's got to be around here somewhere." 2 of the enforcers peeled off, heading toward the tree line where Lenore was hidden. Ben's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "Last chance to do this the right way, Buck. Always trying to be the hero." Healy stepped closer, cracking his knuckles. "Just like in the military, right? How'd that work out for you?" The first punch came without warning. Ben blocked it, but the second caught him in the ribs. Banner lunged forward with a snarl, but one of Healy's men kicked the dog aside. Ben's world exploded in pain as fists rained down. Through the haze, he heard a scuffle and Lenore's sharp cry. They'd found her. The sound of her struggling filled his earpiece. "Got her, boss!" one of the men shouted. They dragged Lenore into view, her lip bleeding, but her eyes blazing with defiance. "Now then," Healy grabbed Ben's hair, forcing him to look up. "Where's that evidence you claim to have?" "Tell me something first," Ben spat blood. "How much is the senator paying you to keep his son's hobby quiet?" Healy's face darkened. "You think this is just about money? This is my operation. Morrison Jr. just likes to watch and bet. I built this empire. Those dogs are mine. And nobody, not some washed-up vet, not some crippled ex-cop, is going to take it from me." Banner had been circling, watching. Now, with Healy focused on Ben, the German shepherd struck. His teeth sank into Healy's calf, drawing a howl of pain and rage. The big man stumbled, releasing Ben. "Kill that mutt!" Healy roared. But Banner was everywhere at once, a blur of fur and fangs. He darted between the enforcers, snapping and snarling, creating chaos. One man went down, clutching his arm. Another tripped backward, trying to avoid the dog's teeth. Lenore seized her moment. She drove her elbow into her captor's solar plexus, breaking free. In one fluid motion, she drew her backup weapon from her ankle holster. "Freeze!" she commanded. Healy spun toward her, reaching for his own gun. The shot cracked through the morning air. Healy stumbled, clutching his shoulder as blood spread across his shirt. "You shot me!" he screamed in disbelief. "Be grateful I didn't aim lower," Lenore said coldly, keeping her weapon trained on him as his remaining men backed away, hands raised. Ben struggled to his feet, one arm wrapped around his ribs. Banner returned to his side, fur bristling but unhurt. "It's done, Buck," Ben said. "The cameras caught everything. Your confession about Morrison, the assault, all of it." As if on cue, sirens wailed in the distance. Healy's face contorted with fury and desperation. He lunged for Lenore, heedless of her gun. Banner launched himself one final time, hitting Healy square in the chest. Man and dog went down in a tangle of limbs. When they separated, Healy wasn't moving, and Banner stood guard over him, teeth bared. State police vehicles swarmed the scene, followed by FBI agents. Healy and his men were quickly cuffed and secured. Paramedics rushed to Ben, who was swaying on his feet. "Get him to the hospital," Lenore ordered, her own voice shaky with relief and reaction. "Possible broken ribs, definite concussion." As they loaded Ben into the ambulance, Banner refused to leave his side. The paramedics finally gave up and let the dog ride along, his head resting protectively on Ben's leg. "I'll handle things here," Lenora called to him. "You focus on healing up." She turned to the FBI agent beside her. "We've got cameras hidden all over this site. Everything's recorded. And wait until you see what else we have on these guys." The last thing Ben saw before the ambulance doors closed was Healy being led away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him. Banner's warm weight against his leg reminded him that sometimes the smallest and most broken among us could turn out to be the strongest. "Good boy," he whispered, scratching behind Banner's ears. "Good boy." The morning headlines blazed across every screen in Mason Hollow. Senator's son arrested in massive dogfighting ring. Ben watched from his hospital bed as the news anchors detailed the investigation, Banner curled protectively at his feet. The German shepherd's ears perked up every time Ben shifted, still watchful even as his own injuries healed. "The investigation has revealed a shocking web of corruption," the television anchor announced, her expression grave. "Thomas Morrison, Jr., son of State Senator Morrison, stands accused of using the illegal dogfighting operation to launder campaign funds. Sources say the ring generated millions of dollars in illegal betting profits." Lenora entered the room, leaning on her cane more heavily than usual after the fight, but her eyes sparkled with satisfaction. She carried a thick manila envelope. "Turn it up," she said, settling into the chair beside Ben's bed. "You'll want to hear this part." The screen showed federal agents leading Thomas Morrison, Jr. from his estate in handcuffs. His perfectly tailored suit and carefully maintained image couldn't hide his rage as reporters shouted questions. "Multiple local officials have been implicated," the anchor continued, "including 3 police officers and a county judge, all accused of accepting bribes to suppress investigations and destroy evidence. The breakthrough came thanks to the efforts of retired Detective Lenora Briggs and local veterinarian Dr. Ben Talcott." Lenora smiled, patting the envelope. "That's not even the best part. This just came from the Pentagon." Ben's breath caught. After 15 years of silence and shame, could it really be over? The military investigation into the Desert Storm drug scandal has been officially reopened, the anchor announced. New evidence suggests Dr. Talcott, then a military veterinary surgeon, was wrongfully accused of supplying controlled substances to soldiers. Documents indicate he was framed to protect Colonel James Whitmore, who was running an extensive drug operation using military supply chains. Ben's hands trembled as he opened the envelope Lenora offered. Inside were official documents, his honorable discharge restored, back pay authorized, and a formal apology from the Department of Defense. "They found Whitmore's records," Lenora explained softly. "He kept detailed books of everyone he bribed or blackmailed. Your name was there, listed as the fall guy he chose because you'd started asking questions about missing medications." Banner sensed Ben's emotion and moved up the bed, pressing his warm body against Ben's side. The dog who had survived such cruelty now offered comfort to the man who had saved him. "The Pentagon spokesman praised your integrity," Lenora continued, her voice thick. "Said you chose silence over exposing sensitive operations during wartime, even when it cost you everything." Ben stroked Banner's head, remembering those dark days. "I couldn't risk compromising active missions. Too many lives at stake. But I never thought it would take 15 years to clear my name." The television showed footage of Buck Healy and his men being processed at the federal courthouse. Then the screen filled with images of the rescued dogs, including a photo of Banner that made Ben's heart swell. The German shepherd looked regal despite his healing injuries, sitting tall beside Ben's hospital bed. "The case has sparked national outrage," the anchor said. "Animal welfare organizations are calling for stricter penalties for dogfighting. Banner, the brave German shepherd who helped bring down the operation, has become a symbol of resilience and hope." "They want you both to do interviews," Lenora mentioned. "Magazine covers, morning shows, the whole circuit." Ben shook his head. "Banner's been through enough. He deserves peace and quiet." As if in agreement, Banner yawned and settled his head on Ben's lap. completely uninterested in his newfound fame. The hospital room door opened again, admitting a stream of visitors. FBI agents with updates on the prosecution, a military liaison with more paperwork, reporters hoping for comments. Through it all, Banner remained calm but alert, his presence anchoring Ben amid the chaos. Later, when the room finally emptied, Lenora stayed behind. She pulled a newspaper from her bag and spread it across Ben's tray table. The headline read, "Retired Detective Briggs praised for breaking corruption case." "They're calling me a hero," she said, rolling her eyes. "Apparently, I'm inspiring senior citizens everywhere to fight crime." Ben laughed, then winced as his healing ribs protested. "You are a hero, Lenora. You believed in me when no one else would. You risked everything to help us expose the truth." "We did it together," she corrected, reaching over to scratch Banner's ears. "All three of us. Though I have to admit, watching this little warrior take down Buck Healy was something special." Banner's tail thumped against the bed, but he didn't lift his head from Ben's lap. The trust between man and dog had been forged in fire and trauma, tempered by healing and hope. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, painting the room in warm light. On the television, the news had moved on to other stories, but the impact of their investigation continued to ripple outward. More arrests were being made. More officials were facing consequences. More dogs were being rescued from similar operations across the state. "What happens now?" Lenora asked quietly. Ben looked down at Banner, then at the military documents that had finally cleared his name. "We rebuild. The clinic first. Those animals still need help. And this time, we do it right. No more shadows, no more silence." Banner lifted his head and licked Ben's hand, as if sealing the promise. They had all been broken in different ways, a wounded dog, a disgraced vet, a sidelined detective. But together, they had found not just justice, but healing. The afternoon faded into evening, and Banner dozed peacefully beside his chosen person, unconcerned with headlines or hearings. For him, justice was simpler. He was safe, he was loved, and the man who had saved him would never have to hide in shame again. 6 months after the trial that shook Mason Hollow to its core, the morning sun cast long shadows across the freshly painted sign. Second Chance Animal Sanctuary. The new facility stood on 10 acres just outside town, its pristine buildings and secure fencing a far cry from Ben's old clinic. Banner sat alert at the entrance, his once mangled legs now strong and straight, though the scars remained visible beneath his thick fur. His amber eyes tracked the approaching car, tail beginning to wag as he recognized Lenora's sedan pulling into the gravel parking lot. Ben emerged from the main building, clipboard in hand, watching with quiet pride as Lenora stepped out of her car, without reaching for the cane she'd relied on for so long. Her physical therapy had paid off, leaving her with only the slightest hint of a limp. "Well, look at this place," Lenora called out, spreading her arms wide. "Hard to believe this was just an empty field a few months ago." Banner trotted over to greet her, accepting her gentle scratches behind his ears. The German Shepherd had grown into his role as the sanctuary's unofficial welcoming committee, somehow sensing which new arrivals needed space and which ones craved immediate comfort. "The construction crew finished the last kennel block yesterday," Ben said, his voice carrying a warmth that had been absent during his years of isolation. "We can house up to 50 animals now, with room to expand." They walked together toward the main building, Banner padding quietly beside them. Through the windows, they could see volunteers working with various animals. A pit bull learning to trust again, a 3-legged cat discovering how to play, a retired police horse enjoying the peace of the paddock. "The military pension back pay didn't hurt," Lenore observed, noting the quality of the equipment and facilities. "But this is more than just money, Ben. This is healing made real." Inside, the walls were lined with before and after photos of rescued animals. Each image told a story of transformation, but none more powerful than Banner's. His intake photo showed a broken, terrified pup. Beside it hung a recent shot of him standing proud and tall, helping a newly rescued dog take its first tentative steps toward recovery. He knows what they're going through, Ben explained, watching as Banner approached a nervous shepherd mix in one of the indoor runs. Sometimes I think he remembers everything, not just the pain, but the moment someone finally showed him kindness. The shepherd mix, still bearing the marks of neglect, watched Banner with uncertain eyes. Banner lay down, making himself small and non-threatening, offering peaceful companionship without demands. It was a technique he'd perfected over months of helping new arrivals adjust. "Just like someone else I know," Lenora said pointedly, giving Ben a knowing look. "A certain veterinarian who needed his own second chance." Ben's smile came easily now, no longer weighted by shame or regret. "I never thought I'd find my way back. Not after everything that happened. But Banner ... He paused, watching his dog's gentle interaction with the nervous newcomer. "Banner showed me that broken doesn't mean beyond saving." They continued their tour, passing through the rehabilitation room where a young volunteer was helping an elderly golden retriever with water therapy. The pool had been Ben's personal project, a feature he'd always wanted in his old clinic but could never afford. "Remember when you wouldn't even let people help you carry groceries?" Lenora asked, gesturing to the dozen volunteers working throughout the facility. "Now look at you, running a whole team." "They're here because they believe in second chances," Ben replied. "Just like you did, when everyone else had written me off." They stepped outside into the autumn air, where the sanctuary's grounds stretched toward distant woods. Several dogs played in secure enclosures, their barks carrying notes of joy rather than fear. Banner watched them all, ever the guardian, before turning his attention to a car pulling up the drive. "New arrival?" Lenora asked, noting Ben's shift to professional focus. He nodded. "Hoarding case. 20 cats found in a basement. We're taking 12 of them." His voice held no judgment, only determination to help. Banner was already moving toward the vehicle, his posture calm and welcoming. He'd learned to read Ben's cues, understanding that new arrivals needed special care. The transformation from traumatized victim to confident healer was complete in both of them. As they worked together to unload the carriers, each containing a frightened cat, Lenora watched the subtle communication between man and dog. Every movement was coordinated, every gesture aimed at creating an atmosphere of safety and peace. "You know," she said later, as they settled the last cat into a quiet recovery room, "when I first found you hiding out in that old clinic, I never imagined this." Ben paused in his work, looking around at what they'd built. The sanctuary hummed with purpose, not just housing animals, but actively healing them. Every detail, from the sound-dampening walls to the special non-slip flooring, had been chosen with recovery in mind. "I was running away back then," he admitted, "trying to disappear. But Banner ... He reached down to stroke the dog's head. "Banner taught me that sometimes the best way to heal yourself is to help heal others." Banner's tail wagged at the sound of his name, but his eyes remained fixed on the new cats, monitoring their comfort level. One particularly scared tabby had pressed itself against the back of its enclosure. Banner lay down nearby, providing a calm presence, just as he had done countless times before. "It's not just the animals that find healing here," Lenora observed softly. "I've seen how people change when they volunteer. Something about this place. It restores faith." Ben's smile deepened, reaching his eyes in a way that had once seemed impossible. "That's what second chances are about. Not just surviving, but finding purpose again." They stood together, watching as Banner's patient presence began to work its magic. The frightened tabby inched forward, drawn by the German shepherd's peaceful energy. It was a small victory, but at the Second Chance Animal Sanctuary, every step toward healing was celebrated. As the afternoon light filled the room, Ben looked at his unlikely family, a retired detective who had never lost faith in him, a once broken dog who had become a healer, and all the souls, human and animal alike, who had found their way to this place of redemption. For the first time in more years than he could count, His smile came not from relief at surviving another day, but from the deep fulfillment of living with purpose. Banner pressed against his leg, a gentle reminder of how far they had come together. The scars they both carried had become badges of survival, marks of a journey that had led them not just to healing, but to a calling greater than either could have imagined alone. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.